He is a wildlife biologist and conservationist who became deeply impressed by the importance of frontlines work being done by biologists in developing nations, lacking even the most basic of research tools. From this inspiration, he founded Idea Wild in 1991 to minimize loss of biodiversity by empowering people who are working on these issues in these developing countries. Idea Wild enables the preservation of some of the world's greatest ecological treasures. And since its founding 24 years ago, the organization has aided in over 4,800 projects in 115 countries. It is my deep pleasure to introduce to you a true change maker, Wally Van Sickle.
Thank you very much, Jesse. Truly a pleasure to be here tonight. It's truly an honor to speak with all of you. Thank you very, very much for this opportunity and for all the work you do in conservation already. I want to kind of share a little bit about something I'm passionate about, sort of the philosophy behind that, the stories behind that, where it came from. Maybe some of these things will be similar to experiences you've had, and then what it created, the conservation organization that was created because of that. Before I get started in this organization, as I said, I want to talk about my passion, but I want to hear a little bit about your passion. So in the earlier presentation, I asked the crowd what they were passionate about. And we had different people. One wanted to be a paleontologist, one wanted to be a nurse, different things in the audience. And so I'm curious who's going to be brave and would like to share what their passion was in this crowd. And it can be anything. It can be baking, it can be whatever you're passionate about. So who would be brave enough to share? Climate change, passionate about climate change. All right, thank you very much. Who else is passionate about?
Conservation education.
Conservation education. I might have expected that because from you. All right, what do you got, sir?
Big Leopold fan, land conservation.
Ah, okay, all right. Thank you. Aldo Leopold, you read all his books, know everything about him, right? Thank you.
Leopold Education Project.
Okay, beautiful. And you, young lady? All right. She was going to shelter for pets that are hurt or injured and that need help from you. Beautiful. All right. So we got a healer, an animal healer right here in front of us. Who else we got that's passionate about something? I know we all got it. Every single one of us is passionate about something. Sometimes it's a little scary to share that in front of the rest of the crowd, but what do you got?
Well, I'm passionate about caring for the dying.
Caring for the dying. Another healer in the crowd. Very nice. Thank you. Yeah? Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Anybody else want to share?
Monarch butterflies.
Monarch butterflies. So I suspect you two know each other.
Polar bears.
Polar bears, right? All right. Beautiful. Who else?
Water quality.
Water quality, right? So you're going to be at this next presentation, I'm sure, right? Thank you. What do you got? Rhino conservation. Have you got down to see one of those guys in the wild? Yeah, that'll inspire you, won't it? Yeah, okay. Who else? Take one more.
Elephants?
Elephants, yeah. You got to see those guys out in the wild yet?
No, but I met somebody that went on safari, and
Yeah.
she gave me some pictures. So
Okay.
It was really neat.
You got to get on safari.
I know.
All right, truly inspiring. All right, so thank you all for that. We all got passion inside of us, and we all got to let it out one way or another. So I'm going to talk about what I was passionate about and kind of what that led to. Back in 1971, I was extremely passionate about prehistoric animals. I was a total dinosaur nerd, and so much of a dinosaur nerd that I had to create a dinosaur club. There wasn't a lot of guys in the club. There was my little buddy Brett Jeske and my little brother Wally Van Sickle, right? So it wasn't a big club, but we were a passionate bunch of dinosaur lovers. And we had our first exhibition. We showed off all the little rocks and fossils we had and the dinosaur books, and people came and looked at them. And anyway, that passion kind of led to a passion in modern day animals as well. So, and I actually found out, wow, you can get a degree in zoology and you can study animals? Great. So I went on to get a bachelor's degree in zoology at South Dakota State University. I'm from Rapid City, South Dakota. Well, in the meantime, I probably spent way too much time, like probably a lot of us in this audience, watching Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, right? And watching all the predicaments Marlin got into and even the worst ones that Jim got into, right? Because Marlon would kind of stand back like a sensible person and send Jim out there and let him wrestle with the anaconda. While watching that thing, I mean, I was so inspired by watching that I knew that after my zoology degree, I had to go to Africa. So I worked for the South Dakota State Highway Department for a summer, and I saved up my money, and I flew to Kenya. And when I flew to Kenya, I didn't know really what I wanted to be yet, to do with this zoology degree. And so from here on, I'm going to really impose or say how much these good mentors, wandering, and volunteer played a role in fueling this passion. So I flew to Nairobi, and I met this wonderful gentleman. He's still one of my all-time best lifelong friends. His name is Dr. Barry Cocker, and he was a veterinarian. And I got to intern with him for a couple weeks and, learn what it was like to be a veterinarian. Because I didn't know with my zoology degree if I was going to be a veterinarian or if I was going to be a wildlife biologist. Well, after working 2 weeks with Barry, I decided I did not want to be a veterinarian, right? I love this guy. He's one of the greatest individuals I've ever met. I still go to his house there. We base all our operations in East Africa out of his place. He comes and visits me in the United States. He's a lifelong friend. But I knew I didn't want to be a veterinarian. But while I was working with Barry, I met this wonderful lady who's named Flora Ngueno. And she led weekly bird trips out and about Nairobi. And every week you got to hang out with her and go out. And this lady was crazy about birds. And what are birds but little miniature dinosaurs, right? And she showed me all the little miniature dinosaurs that lived in Kenya. And I spent a lot of time on Flora's bird walks, and incredibly passionate, inspirational lady. Anyway, I asked Flora, who's doing all the wildlife research in Kenya? And is there anybody I can volunteer for? Because I want to see if I want to be a wildlife biologist. And she directed me to this character. His name is Leon Bennon. He wasn't Dr. Leon Bennon yet, but he was a guy working on his PhD through Oxford University. And every day he's out in the bush working with this species called the gray-headed social weaver. Well, lo and behold, Leon took me on for 2 months, and I spent 2 months in the bush working and recording data on gray-headed social weavers and all the other little dinosaurs we got to catch, including little barbets and little sunbirds and little hornbills and all the other amazingly beautiful species. And what's cool about this, in afterthought, is Leon Bennon went on to become the head of research for BirdLife International. Okay? At the time, I didn't know I had picked such an amazing mentor. But it was an amazing volunteership. During that volunteership, I noticed that Leon's mist nets, which he used to capture the birds, were in really bad condition. All right? Chad and I were just talking about really big birds. Anyway, ostriches could have ran through these mist nets, okay, or giraffes or any other animals that were coming by. The mist nets are supposed to have little holes this big. Well, his had giant holes in them. And I asked Leon, I said, Leon, why don't you get some new mist nets for your study? And he goes, well, I really can't afford it. They're $40 a piece. And I just thought, that's kind of weird. So anyway, I just kind of stored that. Well, the rest of the time in Kenya, I was eager to get out and see what Marlon Perkins had showed me on television. And so I went out and on safaris for the next 2 months and got to see these big fellas, which you need to go see, right? And these big fellas, which you need to go see. They're red in Tsavo National Park because the dirt's red there. So they tend to be red. Elephants are red. The beautiful zebras, of course. The beautiful Cape buffalo with a beautiful little oxpecker on the side of it. Impalas. Elands. All kinds of things. Lions, you pretty much drive right up to on safari. I don't know if any of you have been on safari, but the lion's right there. You pretty much drive up with the vehicle right there, and the lion stays right there, which is pretty remarkable. So you get some fantastic photographs. Same with cheetahs. Drive right up to cheetahs in the wild. And this leopard was so close, it kept running underneath the very vehicle we were in, chasing a rabbit, trying to catch a rabbit underneath the vehicle. So I highly recommend a safari to East Africa and do what Marlon Perkins wants you to do. And then we got to meet a lot of other critters that, you'd never even heard of. Banded mongoose. I'd never heard of banded mongoose before, and, you got to meet these critters that you'd never even heard of. So you kind of fell in love with all those critters. Well, this is kind of a side story, but in 2006, when I went back to Kenya after 20 years, I was given a presentation at the Natural History Museum about Ideal Wild, and this lady walked in the room. Guess who this is? Flora Ngueno still in charge of bird walks, still taking everybody on bird walks, 80-some years old with a beautiful sparkle in her eyes, enthusiastic. She's inspired half the conservationists in Kenya or more to do this kind of work, right? And she was still at it in 2006 and very, very energetic. So I was blown away by the passion of that lady. Okay, so after that, well, I decided, well, yeah, I guess I do want to be a wildlife biologist. I needed to go on to graduate school and figure out what that was all about. And so once again, these tools play a role in that. The first thing I had to do was go wandering. So I bought a really crappy old Mercury Monarch car for $600, and I drove around the western United States trying to find a professor I would like to work with for my degree. And on that wandering, I got to meet Dr. Fred Lindsay, who was a specialist in bear and mountain lion and other big game at the University of Wyoming. And I knew this is the guy that I wanted to have as my mentor, right? And so Fred took me on as a graduate student. And this wonderful guy, I need to get a better picture of him, is Clint Meekum. He was a houndsman since he was a very young boy in southern Utah and knew everything about catching mountain lions because his father taught him everything about that. So I had two very good mentors. Went to work for the next 2 years studying mountain lions in southern Utah. And we got to put radio collars on these rascals. That's not an easy trick. and chase them around and learn everything about mountain lions, their diet, threats, home range size, how they treat each other, how many babies they have, all these things. Because of this research and other research that mountain lion researchers have done, you know what's happened in the mountain lion population? It's one of the few success stories. We're actually re-expanding the mountain lion range back across the United States. And so I like to accredit that to a lot of the work that was done with those animals. We got to climb up in the trees with them and get clawed at and urinated on, screamed at, everything you can imagine, but eventually we'd get a collar on them. So this one here, obviously I wouldn't be standing here if it wasn't immobilized, but we'd just put a radio collar on that male. Mentors are also our parents as well, and so my mom and dad played a very big role in this. My father came down and actually helped me. We put a radio collar in that cat one day, and that was a fantastic experience. So something to remember from this project that really kind of didn't strike me at the time, but I had helicopters, I had more helicopters, I had airplanes, I had trucks and snowmobiles, and houndsmen and technicians and horses with blankets and everything a biologist could dream of, right? All those things. I was very spoiled. I didn't even realize it at the time. This was a well-funded project, and that was the same when I worked for the United States Forest Service on another carnivore project. So anyway, that was just something that happened there that it's going to come back in the story later. I also got to do a lot of wandering on this project. This was a part of the United States that I'd always wanted to be and explore, and those mountain lions took us to some of the most beautiful places you could imagine. Just a funny story on this. I'm from South Dakota. You'd think I'd know how to ride a horse, but I did not know how to ride a horse. And the first 2 weeks, I had to follow that houndsman that was basically born on a horse. And I pretty much demonstrated every possible way you can fly off a horse. Those were some rough landings. Here again, I am with the mentor, Dr. Fred Lindsay, and we're tracking a lion that's moving around down in here. So it was a beautiful country to work in. And that's where I really learned how to be a wildlife biologist and how to use the tools of the trade and what it meant to collect research on wildlife. So after graduate school, I kind of had enough of all that, enough graduate school and enough learning for a little while. And so we went on another walkabout, as they would say, the Aboriginal might say, or a wandering. Myself and two buddies got together, and once again, we're going to see how mentors, wandering, and volunteering played a role in passion. So myself here and my two buddies, we flew off to Sydney, Australia. We bought ourselves a crappy little car once again. We filled that car up with all of our camping gear. And for the next 4.5 months, we went from one national park to the next national park to the next national park. And what were we doing? Chasing dinosaurs, right? Any national park with any kind of a different habitat, we went there and we basically would bird watch all day long, sometimes even at night for the nocturnal species. And we went into mountainous areas, the Blue Ridge Mountains. We went into coastal areas. Australia's an amazing place. It's like a giant bird cage, too, filled with galahs and cockatoos and lorikeets and so many unbelievably beautiful species. We spent a lot of time there. Spent time bird watching in swamps, even physically getting down in swamps until I learned that there was these things called swimming leeches. And swimming leeches, you don't want them going places that, that they like to go. So we stopped bird watching in swamps after a while. But, and then, trips up these beautiful canyons where we were the only ones up there. What I want to say about this is it wasn't just wandering physically, all right? A lot of times we need to wander mentally, and we need to wander outside of our belief system. A lot of times we kind of get stuck in our belief system, which is basically kind of a reoccurring pattern of thought, not necessarily the truth. So it's fun to get out there and kind of look at yourself, look at the way the world works from a different point of view. And I really encourage that, that most of us go wandering. And a lot of times in the United States, when we get out of high school or college or whatever, we go right into work and right into family or whatever. And we need to spend a little bit of time maybe taking a break and getting out and doing a little wandering about. As I said, beliefs are a really reoccurring pattern of thoughts, not necessarily the truth. I do think there is some truth on the planet. One of my truths I think I've come to is that love's a good thing. And I love our planet, and I think we need to love each other, and I think we need to love the species on our planet. So maybe that truth is working for me right now. But anyway, amazing trip in Australia. During that experience of wandering, I got to meet this guy, Dr. Todd Soderquist. And this guy was crazy passionate about marsupials. All he thought about. He'd be up all night working on marsupials, studying them, collecting research data, especially with this little fella called a bushy-tailed phascogale. Cute little guy. Only way you're going to collect the information on this is to work all night. And one night, Todd's spotlight quit. A little $40 Q-beam spotlight. And he was all upset about it. And I'd come from a project with helicopters and airplanes and horses with blankets and all kinds of things. And I just thought, what's the big deal? It's a $40 spotlight. Who cares? Well, he said, I can't afford that. I've spent all the money in my research project out of my own pocket. And I don't have the money for a $40 spotlight. So I kind of, put that one back in the memory banks and filed that one away. Our last little trip in Australia before we came home was they all recommended we needed to go out here and have an experience with marine life. Go out to Lady Musgrave Island, camp for a few days and see what it's like and meet some of those marine creatures. Being from South Dakota, I'd never had this experience before, so we took this boat out to this little dinky island and we spent 1 week out on that island. And that's where I got to see baby turtles hatch, manta rays, eagle rays, sea snakes, tropical fish of every imaginable color, coral reefs. What happens then? You fall in love with the ocean and all the, the life that's found in a reef. So that happened. That wasn't the only thing that happened while we were out there. A cyclone hit. An unseasonal, out-of-season cyclone hit the island while we were there. And you see that island isn't very big. There was 20-foot waves coming over the reef. The island was only about this tall off the water. Thank God for the reef, right? We would have been swimming. It was knocking down trees on the island. So for a day and a half, we held the walls up of the tent and hoped that this thing was going to pass. And the other thing that made it difficult was because that boat that's supposed to come get us couldn't come get us for 2 weeks now. So while we were on the island, we had to collect all the water we could collect, and we had to go out fishing. Caught some octopus, caught fish, ate little mussels and different things. It was a long couple of weeks. And every day we'd look for this boat to come, and every day it didn't come. Well, anyway, finally after 2 weeks, that boat came. But the cool thing about this experience, we wandered out to this island. We kind of got stuck on the island. But in those 2 weeks, I decided, I think instead of going back and working on a graduate degree, another one, I wanted to create a nonprofit organization that helped people with tools. Because I kept running into this in Kenya, in Australia, and some other places where I kept front lines of conservation, and these guys didn't have the most basic tools, right? So I came back from that ready to start a nonprofit organization, and a friend of mine called and said, I need you, Wally, to volunteer in something. Well, of course, I had to go run off and volunteer for one more thing. And once again, good mentors, wandering, and volunteership played a role in this. So this gentleman right here, Courtney Conway, asked me to come help him research birds and how they survived over the winter in Central America, birds that are coming down from the United States. And got to work out in the jungle with this gentleman, Mayan Indian, Patrocinio Chiac, and I got to learn how he saw the world and all the life forms that are found in the rainforest through his eyes. He was an amazing teacher, an amazing mentor. To follow him around in the jungle was unbelievable. And once again, here, there, I got to fall in love basically with the tropical forest. for the first time. This guy, crazy bugger, was one of the most amazing, intelligent, dedicated, hardcore working ornithologists I've ever met. And he basically about pushed us all to death to try and collect the data on these birds. He was an amazing guy. So we worked in that jungle for three months. And once again, what are we doing? We're chasing baby dinosaurs, or little dinosaurs. Puff birds and sunbirds and royal flycatchers. This little flycatcher, he doesn't look like that when he's in the mist net. But when you pick him up, take him out of the mist net, he's got a flare on the back of his head that he raises up, turns sideways, and then starts shaking back and forth. And so you don't even know he has all those feathers on his head. Little mannequins, all sorts of beautiful tanagers, motmots, blue-crowned motmots, beautiful, beautiful little dinosaurs. Kingfishers, woodpeckers. Yep. And the other thing that was amazing about this project was we got to sleep in a Mayan village every night. So we got to see how an indigenous group works and interacts with the rainforest. And that was another great learning experience for all of us. So I've told you kind of those three things. We're going to wander, we're going to pick good mentors. And then the other thing is I want us to really think about visualization, especially with our passions. So we often think about, you know, if you're a track star or something, you visualize yourself leaning across the tape in first place and breaking the tape. You're the first guy to do it, right? But a lot of times we don't necessarily do that with our passions. And so your passion with elephants, you need to start visualizing yourself on safari in Kenya somewhere. Okay, so you're gonna end up getting there because of that. And any of you other who have shared your passions, you need to visualize yourself in that place or anything else you want. And start imagining yourself in that place. And even better, if you write down some goals, take a pen and write those things down, you're way, way, way more likely to make those things happen. So take the time to do that. I kind of learned visualization techniques from Paramahansa Yogananda, from this guy Deepak Chopra, you probably have heard of him, Don Miguel Ruiz, Eckhart Tolle. There's a lot of people that teach visualization, right? Esther and Jerry Hicks. And it's pretty important. Okay, you can think of visualization or imagination however you want to think about it. But it's an important tool in your toolbox to getting towards your passion, right? Just as a little example, in the summertime, my wife and I get to teach these leadership courses to 8th graders. And one of the things we do is I take a whiteboard and I stick a little red dot on that whiteboard. And I ask those 8th graders, what is this thing? The 8th graders kind of sit there and at first nobody says anything. And then finally one kid says, it's a red dot. And then another kid says, yeah, it's a red dot, because that's the safe thing to say. You know, that's got to be the right answer. And then finally a kid up front says, oh, it's a booger. And then another kid says it's Rudolph's nose. And then another kid says it's Mars. And then some kid says, you know, it's a red black hole, or, you know, whatever the heck they come up with. Just amazingly fun stuff. And then we just go. Every single kid comes up with some crazy thing. And if you do this with kindergartners, it starts right from the beginning. The kindergartens will start with the booger right from the beginning and Mars, and here we go, right? Right? You take this to med school students. I haven't done this, but I've heard this. And the med school students will argue whether it's a red dot on a whiteboard or a whiteboard with a red dot on it. Okay? So what's happened to our imagination as we get older? Okay? Do we want that to happen? We don't. Keep that imagination of the kindergartner. And when you're coming through your problems and different things along the path of life, use your imagination to see your way around those things and put yourself in that place you want to be. Super important. Anyway, that's one of the tools we've used to create Idea Wild. This is what a cat thinks of a red dot. I think. I don't really know what cats think, but anyway. If you want a really great show, and if you're kind of more scientific-minded, try out this movie, What the Bleep Do We Know? And it'll talk about what the top physicists are saying about visualization and imagination. So it's not just some hooky-pooky crap I'm making up. All right, so anyway, all those things led to the creation of the nonprofit organization called Idea Wild in 1991. So you see how the passion led to the action. I founded this organization, my wife and I, in 1991. It's almost 25 years old. The reason we founded this organization, National Geographic decided, who all gets National Geographic? Who all seen a National Geographic? We've certainly all seen our National Geographics, right? And before the year 2000, they decided there were 6 issues most likely to affect humankind for the next 1,000 years. One of those issues was the conservation of biological diversity. The variety of life on our planet is going to affect us, it's going to affect our children, our children's children, our children's 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 children, 1,000 years out, or more. Millions of years, probably. This biodiversity, just to refresh, we use it for everything. We use it for food, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Fiber, our clothing, this building, all sorts of things. Pharmaceuticals, every time we get sick, right? Pollination. We just talked about the monarch butterflies. Pollination. Economics. The ecosystem services provided by the biological diversity of the planet. There's not a single business that could exist on this planet if it wasn't for, if you took those ecosystem services away, right? So anything, we rely on it for everything. Not a single one of us would be in this room tonight. It's the foundation of our existence. That's why it's so important. So after all these experiences, I decided to create this organization to minimize the loss of biodiversity. We want to do that by empowering people on the front lines of conservation. Like that guy with no spotlight, like Leon Bennon with no mist nets, those people. Imagine Jane Goodall with no binoculars. Okay, you need them. Another couple examples of why biodiversity is important. Any of us who've been to Yellowstone National Park have seen some of these hot pools. Some beautiful little microbes are found in there called Thermus aquaticus. You can't even see them. You pull them out, you take an enzyme out of those, and almost all the genetic research now done on the planet was made possible by the fact that we conserved Yellowstone National Park and left those pools there as habitat, right? This beautiful little plant's called rosy periwinkle. I was walking around looking at lemurs in Madagascar, and I looked down, it's like, wow, rosy periwinkle. You grind it up, you make vincristine, it's one of the top 5 cancer drugs. Okay? And we could just go on and on and on and on with this story. So I think all of us represent this wonderful, beautiful lady, Jane Goodall. Truly one of the heroes of the planet. She does conservation presentations, I think 300 out of 365 days a year. This wonderful person, Steve Irwin, same thing. He left us a little bit early, but his daughter's kind of picking up where he left off. So I call these people the heroes and sheroes of the planet. Now those 3 I just showed you are very famous ones. But there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of other ones, right, that are not so famous, right? Like a lot of people in this room, actually. So our job, when I started Idea Wild in 1991, think about it. There was no website, there was no smartphones, there was no internet, there was no email. Right? So I started a conservation organization in Colorado. How are we going to tell anybody where to send their application for equipment for? Well, so that meant physically flying to Guadalajara, Mexico, giving a presentation at a university, riding all night on a bus to Mexico City, giving another presentation, riding all night to Veracruz, giving another presentation, riding all the way down to the bottom of Mexico, then flying to Guatemala and doing the same thing. That's how we started. So I'd physically go to those countries and introduce Idea Wild to the people that were interested in conservation. I kept my day job as a wildlife biologist for the United States Forest Service. And that group there was one of the first groups I ever met. These are professors and these are their students working to conserve the biodiversity in the state of Puebla, Mexico. We've done that all through Latin America, all through Southeast Asia, all through Eastern and Southern Africa now. And we visited 56 countries doing that. And these are the projects they send us. These are the things they request. They request these types of equipment here in green, and these are the kinds of projects you see with butterflies, with birds, with turtles, dolphins. Here's with birds, flora, Mexican wolf, bats, coral reefs, and they're wanting simple things. You see, these are just simple things. And you see the average cost of one of these projects is not $10,000, not $5,000, not even $1,000. The average cost of one of these projects is about $650 to $700. Right? That makes a big difference. For example, a biologist in Cuba was a crustacean expert. All the shrimps, crabs, isopods that are found in Cuba. And he was discovering and describing them all and creating a book about all the ones. He didn't have a digital camera. We sent him a digital camera. It's a $250 digital camera. His salary is $25 a month. It was 10 months of his salary for one digital camera. Okay? So that's how big of a difference they make. Now we're just going to kind of pop around the globe a little bit, visiting some different projects that we've provided equipment for. First one takes place in Madagascar with the old golden-crowned sifaka. Extraordinary animal. We knew it was really good at jumping, but we didn't know much else about it. So we equipped this crew with the equipment they needed. They went out into this area, this region of Madagascar where there's fragments of forest left, and they walked transects in every single one of these fragments. Looked at the diet, home range size, threats, any other things they could find out about these Siphocus. And because of their work and their work with the community, they created a new protected area in Madagascar. I think I can do this now. I'm not sure. I was going to teach you all a lemur call. I've been a little bit scratchy lately, but you know, Jane Goodall, she always teaches you how to do the chimp call. So we'll give it a try and see if I can do it. This is the type of lemur called an indri. It's the largest of all lemurs. And the call goes something like this. So I think we can all learn this together. It's a 3-part call. So we're going to go up, down and up, and then up. So let's try it all together. Here we go. And one more for good measure. Beautiful, right? I find this call extremely helpful when I'm on the ski slope and I've lost my buddies. I found it extremely helpful when I'm at a graduation and the person's graduating and getting their diploma up front and they don't know who's in the audience. You can crank out one of those and they'll know you're there, right? So use it however you want to use it. Another project I wanted to show you, this one involves a very large fish off the coast of Mexico. I think most of you recognize that as a whale shark. The front of the whale shark, which can be a scary place to be, even though they don't try to eat you, but it looks like they're going to. This wonderful lady, Denny Ramirez, is completely passionate about manta rays and whale sharks. Went and got her PhD studying them, and we provided her with an underwater camera and the housing, a couple other things. She swims underwater with these animals. She photographs the side of them because the spot pattern is indicative of every different individual. They've got a collection of 4,000 different individuals now in a worldwide collection in this database, right? And she can also monitor the effects of large props on the species. So when she first began working in La Paz, Mexico, 60-some% of the animals had these chunks taken out of them. Then she created an exclusion zone. It keeps the boats with the big props out of there, and since she's done that, 22% of the animals have this now versus 66 in the past. So it's quite a difference she's making. This is their little research boat. This is 15 feet long. Here, this is a juvenile whale shark. This is not even an adult, right? Yep. This is a beautiful project. Anybody can go visit this project. It's right out of La Paz, and she takes people out as part of her fundraising efforts to continue with her research. So if anybody wants to go visit this project. Anyway, she does a lot of conservation education with children. She puts up these large posters and whatnot in areas that the ecotourism operations are occurring and where people can learn more about them, how close you can get, the things you shouldn't do around a whale shark. Speaking of economics of biodiversity, this project and others that take people out to see whale sharks, a few years ago it became a $47 million business, right? Okay. So that's another part of the economics of biodiversity. This project has to do with scarlet macaws. It's in Costa Rica. These animals are cavity nesters, so they nest in the same hole every year, and if you're a poacher, you know where that hole is. You climb up the tree, you sell the chick. On average, I think those guys made about $200, which is a lot of money to some of those poachers. We provided climbing gear so they could get up in these trees and put up artificial nest boxes in areas that are away from poaching activities, like right by the ranger's house, right by in the middle of a town where everybody can keep an eye on it, right by the ranch house, different places where you could keep an eye on the nests. And that really worked well, and they're starting to see an increase in the amount of scarlet macaws. And a lot of these projects get very high profile. For example, the president of Costa Rica went up on these ropes to unveil the first nest box on national television. Yep. And thankfully, we buy really good ropes. So. But I wanted to say something about the economics of scarlet macaws as well. These guys estimated that over the lifetime of 35 years, the ecotourism it brings into Costa Rica and into this park in particular Each of these birds they estimated to be worth $500,000 a bird to the economics of Costa Rica. Number one source of foreign exchange in Costa Rica is ecotourism. All right, another beautiful bird found in Costa Rica, it's called the resplendent quetzal. Beautiful green iridescent feathers that come all the way down here. Beautiful green mohawk, velvet red chest. Don't know much about this bird. And this wonderful gentleman, 24, 25, 26 years old, Michael Garcia, working on his, he's a Costa Rican working on his master's degree. We got him geared up with some equipment. He went out and studied the bird for 2 years. And has anybody been to Costa Rica lately? Costa Rica, yeah, 1, 2, 3. The newest national park in Costa Rica is called Los Quetzales National Park because of this guy, right? Yeah. We spent $450 on this project. So if you do go to Costa Rica, make sure you see this national park. Now we're going to jump over to West Africa. This is the country of Gabon. This is the Atlantic Ocean out here. The president of Gabon decided there was going to be 13 new protected areas. What an amazing gift to humanity. Those protected areas have baby chimps in them. They have baby elephants in them. They have baby gorillas in them. And of course, thousands and thousands of other less cute species. And in order to conserve some of those protected areas, you need to do work on conservation education around those parks and create a buffer zone of people that actually care about that park. So in comes Amy Sanders. Amy Sanders was a Peace Corps volunteer. And she went there and she does conservation education in the little villages around Moyambu National Park, which is on the coast. Amy didn't want tracking gear or climbing equipment or binoculars. She wanted puppets. Lots and lots of puppets. Sea turtles and sharks and seahorses, shark tents, jellyfish. And she comes into these little villages in her little canoe, pops out, and does conservation education through puppetry and theater. And because she's so effective at it, she's been asked to do that around many other national parks, and they're actually starting to use that technique in Botswana and other places. All right, so all these projects collect data for PhDs, master's degrees, scientific publications, guidebooks, coloring books for children, videos. A lot of information we need to conserve species now. We need this data now, right? But at the same time, it builds the environmental leaders of those countries. Because we really need environmental leaders in each and every one of those countries. And this helps produce environmental leaders. So it's both short-term and long-term conservation. Idea Wild now, we provide equipment for 40 projects every single month. Right? That's 1.3 per day, I believe. We are experiencing a gap right now. We should be doing 50 a month. There's 10 of them every month I'm rejecting right now. So that's another $6,500 worth of rejects I should not be doing. And I could definitely use some help every single month in January, in February, and March. So if anybody has any great ideas on how to cover that gap, I would be very interested in hearing. We could also use help with corporations who might be able to give us some laptop computers, some GPS systems, some binoculars, some of those things that are most requested, all right, and digital cameras. So if anybody has any connection to those worlds, they can also be used. It doesn't have to be. Maybe somebody's upgrading from old laptops to some brand new laptops, and they got to get rid of 25 laptops. Well, I'd sure like to get my hands on those, right? So please keep an ear open to those things. Since we began, we provided equipment to 4,800 projects in 115 countries. On average, the biologist shares it with at least 2 other colleagues. So we're estimating something like over 14,000 projects have collected data using this equipment. If you want to check out our website, it's ideawild.org. Please sign up, like us on Facebook, and you can see some of the follow-up material that's constantly coming in. We get great camera trap images, we get great videos, great little stories, all kinds of amazing little things comes in from the people we provided equipment for. So that'll keep you kind of abreast about some of the things that are happening. One little last quote to leave you with, the power of the small. Do not underestimate the power of the small, the ability of an individual to go out in the world and make a difference. We often equate largeness with power rather than seeing largeness is in fact a limitation to change. Think of smallness as a virtue, not a limitation. Each and every one of us in this crowd, you cannot imagine how much power and energy is in each one of us to do the things we can do, right? And we've got to keep that in mind because the world tells us otherwise, and it's not true, right? So, follow your passion. Get out there and find some good mentors. Do some wandering. Do some volunteering. Do some visualization and some imagining where you want to be. Put your passion into action. And follow your dinosaur. So that's the end of the main presentation. But I would be more than happy to answer any questions somebody may have about this organization or conservation or any other thing you might want to know about. That little dinosaur right there is a baby great blue heron. Slash Tyrannosaurus Rex. Yeah, I saw somebody posted that on Facebook, and I thought, man, that's the end of my presentation right there. Yep. Great question, Kathy. In the beginning, as I said, I was taught to do wildlife research. They don't teach us that in graduate school, how to fundraise, right? So the first thing I did was I wrote down all the names of my family and friends and my biologist friends, and I wrote them a letter. So we started with direct mail. Then we found some good mentors on how to do events, and so we learned how to do events. Then I found a good mentor on how to write grants. We learned how to write grants. So we do events now that brings in about 100 grand. We do grants now that brings in about 100 grand. Then I had an amazing donor come to me and give us a building. And we became landlords, and we get $100,000 in rent, right? And then we became good at asking individuals for $1,000 or more. We call those our biodiversity buddies. That's another 100,000. And then we got different companies that provide us with tents and binoculars. And as I told you before, we're still looking for a lot of those other items, those laptops, digital cameras, and GPSs we could use some help with. So that's another about a 50, 60. So we do about $500,000 a year now, and we're able to find 400 or provide equipment to 400 projects a year. But the first year of Idea Wild, I definitely kept my day job as a wildlife biologist because we earned a whopping $4,000. You know, so anybody can learn how to fundraise. If I can do it, you can do it. Yeah. That was a 25-year journey. I'm not the quickest learner on the planet. But well, the board is involved if they want to be. We got some donors that like to shift through the pile. Primarily, I read every single one of them. And then our project director, if there's some I'm having trouble with, how much could we actually get this for? Because a lot of times she can get equipment cheaper than I think she can off eBay or some other sources. And so she looks through them all. I'm the guy that reads every single one of them, right? And if there's ones that have to do with agriculture or disease or are poorly written or do not include all the parts, those are easily removed from the pile. So we get about 70 a month. Okay, so there's at least 20 that are going to go right away that we didn't want to fund. But then there's a kind of the middle zone projects. And a lot of them are towards the higher end of our $1,500 minimum. So the lower ones are going to get it first if they're really good proposals. And so some of those higher ones, it's a tough decision. I don't like making it. And I shouldn't be making it because I should be able to raise that extra money, which I hope to do. So it's not easy. Yeah, I don't like that part. Just because our mission statement is to minimize the loss of biodiversity. If they played some role and that was really brought out well in the proposal, then that'd be okay. But our donors are interested in minimizing loss of biodiversity. So there could certainly be other Idea Wilds or other kinds of nonprofits that would do this for agriculture, for sure, or health or disease or all kinds of things. It's an interesting model that's not being replicated very much. Great question. Do we have projects in the U.S. or Canada? As I showed you, the average cost of one of those projects is not a lot. And so I can teach somebody in the U.S. how to fundraise. You can have a garage sale in the U.S. and raise $650. So I leave the U.S. projects and the Canada projects to the individual to figure out how to fundraise. If I can figure it out, they can. And where it's a completely different case in Guatemala or some of those other places. You know, that's a full year's salary for somebody. So it's a lot different. And some of those cultures don't have a culture of giving like we do in the United States. So it's extremely hard to raise that money in those cultures. Do I visit the places and give the items? When I'm really, really lucky, I get to. Yeah. There's too many to do all of them. But I've got to visit maybe 100 of them. Yep. That's a very wonderful thing to do. But normally we have what I nickname mules deliver the equipment. So in their proposal, they got to tell me somebody in the United States who's traveling to that country. So they give us a U.S. address. We ship it to the U.S. address, which saves Idea Wild a lot of money and our donors a lot of money. And then somebody who's traveling to that country hand delivers the equipment, right? So that way it doesn't get stolen, doesn't get lost, doesn't get broken. We don't have to pay for shipping to get it to Uganda, whatever. And it works really, really well. So a lot of other people get to deliver the equipment besides me. We're based out of Fort Collins, Colorado. Yep, just 1 hour north of Denver. Yep. I originally started it in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. We lived there for 2 years and then moved to Colorado. I took a job there doing wildlife safaris where I'd take people out in Grand Teton National Park in Yellowstone, show them wildlife all day, talk about wildlife all day and how to spot different animals, show them how to use a spotting scope, all those things. I took that job because I knew they'd have expendable income and they'd be interested in wildlife and they may be able to start the beginning of Idea Wild. And some of those people are still donors to this day. Yeah. Yep.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure.